Yep.
All right, minions. Welcome to episode 2 of the Zombie and Ox Comic Hour. After many technical difficulties of all kinds and really everything, we are now recording. And believe me, it is a great relief to be able to record after everything. So we're sorry we're not coming to you live tonight. We do apologize for that. It's something we are going to work towards in the future, but at the moment, not going to happen. So, would you like to say hi, Ox?
What's up, listeners? Sorry we're not live, but there's nothing we can really do about that right now.
So, it's been a rather eventful week for us, wouldn't you say?
I'd say so.
You know, hit a bunch of comic shops, got on Twitter. You finally got me to join the cult of Twitter.
It's about time.
Yeah, and I joined Twitter and surpassed you in followers in a matter of days. You knew that would happen, though, didn't you?
I had no doubt in my mind. I mean, either people want to follow you or people don't. I don't say a whole lot of interesting shit, so.
And just the random thoughts that go through my brain.
Yeah, the difference is I don't publish mine all the time.
Yeah, I do. As any of you out there, to all of our Twitter followers, as you've probably discovered, I'm insane, in many different ways. These are the thoughts that come into my mind, and I just publish them for you. Like, cross my heart and hope to die, stick a piece of kryptonite in Superman's eye. Yeah, I have no excuse and never tried to. So, but I have gotten to meet some really cool people on Twitter. We've actually gotten a huge amount of support from the indie comic industry, which is really cool.
Yes, thank you guys.
We've gotten retweets, direct messages from indie comic writers, we've gotten some subtle love from the actual mainstream comic industry, Marvel, DC writers, but by far the indie guys are the ones that are reaching out to us.
One guy in particular, Jason Mikulski, author of Zoe Out of Time, wanted us to plug the fact that it's now available for $1.99 on Amazon for your Kindle. So that's kind of cool.
It is. I actually downloaded the comic myself last night, and it is fantastically written, fantastically drawn. I'd say the art level is right on caliber with that of Grimm Fairy Tales, Xenoscope's baby. And you gotta love Xenoscope's art. You really do. So beautifully drawn, beautifully done, and just really cool people. We've had, what was it? eatgeek.com? Is that the other one that's been a big support of ours?
Oh, let's see. Eat Geek Play.
Eat Geek Play. Okay. Don't just eat geeks. You want to eat geeks and play with them, apparently. Great guys. They've reached out to us, shown us a lot of love. It's just a really cool experience to be able to take something that you want to do just because you want to do it, like this.
Well, you gotta love someone whose logo is a stormtrooper helmet with a knife and fork.
Yeah. Very, very
You gotta
true.
love that.
But for us, we're doing this podcast. No offense, not for you guys. It is a benefit to do it for you guys, but we're doing it for us.
It's purely narcissistic. We're feeding our own egos by doing it. Let's just be honest.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's something that I love comics. You love comics, and this is a chance to express our thoughts and feelings, especially when, going around to different comic shops, which I hit a ton of this weekend, unfortunately, or actually this past week.
Yeah.
You didn't get the chance to make it to, what was it, the one store you were going to, Gainesville, but...
Yeah, well, work.
Yeah. Versus I don't need to sleep.
Right.
So I managed to hit a ton of shops and have some extremely interesting adventures, to say the least.
That's not to say that I won't be going to shops, this coming week. I've got a couple in Annapolis I've got to hit. Got the Gainesville one I've got to hit.
Yeah. And let's hope that your adventures don't compare to some of the ones I had.
I don't think anything could. that was abysmal. What you've been talking about is just absolutely horrendous crap stores.
Yeah. I'm actually gonna start this week on our reviews with starting at the bottom of the list, which is gonna be, let's see, we'll go with Happy Books and Comics in Annandale, Virginia.
The name fits the area.
It's also spelled. I need everyone to understand that this is HAPPI.
Yeah.
Yes, that's HAPPI. So I'm not sure how they're spelling happy, but that's how they spell it. So I go on this trip to find this store. Driving around forever, find it, pull into. I gotta admit, the parking lot was pretty creepy. Which is saying a lot because it was 1:00 in the afternoon.
Okay, whereabouts in Annandale is this shop? Because I'm still not quite sure.
You know where the Fuddruckers used to be? That's like completely torn down.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like a half mile from there.
Okay.
Yeah. Fundamentally, the area that we were in and I was in was in deeply Korean neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah.
The business signs are outnumbered from Korean to English at least 3-1.
Yeah. Great food though.
Oh yeah, great food, great people. But it's just a very heavily Korean area. Which is kind of handy because I do know some Korean, so they get confused and kind of like me because I'm the white guy that can speak Korean. So I go find this place and I go to the address and it's listed as Happy Billiards. Spelling is the same, but apparently Happy Books and Comics is no longer there and has now been turned into a pool hall. So fundamentally, they scored a 0 in all categories because they have no comics.
Well, if you don't exist, you can't really score.
So they zeroed out. I then, went to another store in Herndon, Virginia. And that would be, where was that? That was Phoenix Comics and Toys. Show up there, completely closed down. Still have the sign on the building, but apparently they've been gone from that location for 7 years.
But you found this listing on Google, right?
Right.
Why?
I don't know. You would think that someone would have reported to Google that these places closed, but that's part of why we're going out and we're doing this. Is
true.
For you guys, there is a level of you're gonna hit. Most people are gonna go comic book shops in Google, and they're gonna look at the results. They're gonna go to places, and we find the places that don't exist anymore. Apparently.
Well, I mean, that's the trouble we ran into in New York. It was that we found places that were listed, still existed, but had a different address.
Right.
Which doesn't...
Which is actually what I had found with Phoenix.
Right.
Phoenix had moved, the heart of Leesburg. You'd say that's, 15 miles away?
Something like that, yeah.
15, 20 miles from their original location. And, going in there, they scored... where are they? They scored a 2.7, which was not high at all.
That was my GPA in high school. I mean,
wow,
C+,
In fact, they actually really pissed me off from a number of different categories. It's a level of, if you're going to have back issues or claim to have back issues, have back issues. Don't just have back issues of current comics. That doesn't make back issues. That just makes you have back issues of current comics. That's still considered new comics. When I say back issues in older comics, I'm thinking Golden, Silver, Bronze Age. Not... If you only have modern era comics, it's still not back issues. So, it was frustrating. Sales...
Well, that was your complaint about another shop last week where their archives were non-existent.
Right. And it's a level of, I'm standing there talking to a guy who, if you don't know and you work in a comic shop, tell me you don't know or you're not sure. because, quite honestly, comic fans, we are the ones that we know when you're talking out your ass.
Yeah.
You know, and if I'm trying to hold a conversation with you about a comic I know and love, and you are not making any sense, I'm going to see right through you. And the fact that you're trying is kind of sad. You should know better working in this industry. On top of that, they were overpriced.
Well, I mean, that's the assumption that their customer base is naive,
Right.
which happens.
It does.
Most people going into a shop don't know what they're looking for, don't know what it should cost.
Yeah.
You know?
I know I am an anomaly. I am the guy that will walk in, ask for a particular comic, and immediately catch the attention of the shop owner.
Right. Well, you're asking for obscure stuff.
I am.
I mean, it'd be like going into sort of a quote-unquote mainstream comic shop, and it's like, where's all your Johnnies? You know?
Yeah.
Where's your Clive Barker stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that I'm into only because I think Clive Barker is a twisted, sick individual
Genius.
who makes great movies, makes great action figures.
Excellent video game.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so overall, Phoenix Comics and Toys, also known as Laughing Ogre Comics in Leesburg, 2.7. Biggest thing is likelihood to come back 0. They were gonna get a little bit, but when I got home, I did actually purchase some comics there, and got home to find that my new release comics that I purchased, including a variant cover, had the back cover completely folded and damaged inside the poly bag.
Yeah. Unacceptable, people.
Yeah.
If you're going to market something as a collectible item,
Don't damage it.
yeah, treat it well. It's like your 2 My Little Ponies that you got for your betrothed
Yes.
are still in the boxes. The boxes aren't even dusty. You know, your TARDIS isn't dusty or out of the box. You know, it's a collectible item. You've kept it in collectible condition.
Right. I mean, I've got my action figures, but those aren't collectible items to me. I collect them, yes, but I play with them, and freely admit it. Actually, when we were talking about Annandale, there was another shop that I went there, and they actually scored a 2.5. Now, in all fairness, the only reason that they scored 2.5 is that I cannot properly rate them. And while I say that I speak some Korean, I cannot read Korean. We found this place called Comic Land.
Okay.
And I was with my betrothed, who is a huge manga fan. And so we're looking for this shop. I go up to the address, and it should have been a key that the sign over the door was in giant Korean letters. But me being me...
That's sort of par for the course in that area, though.
Right. So me being me, I walk in anyway. And this is a shop packed with Korean manga. Everything is in Korean.
Right.
Really nice guy, really helpful. If you read Korean, live in the Annandale area, looking for manga, go there. Fantastic selection, apparently. My betrothed ran around squealing. She was in heaven. She couldn't read any of it, but she was happy. They also had, like, Korean, like, potato chips and candy bars.
I love shops like that. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So it was a cool little place. So a 2.5, it's kind of I got to give them the average because, well, not being able to read Korean, I can't accurately gauge them.
Now, I some would argue
Right.
that that's an unfair assessment.
is.
Because if you really wanted to go there and you really wanted Korean comics, you would go out and get the Rosetta Stone and learn Korean for yourself.
Right. Absolutely. But at the same time, it's just one of those where I'm going, not quite what I was looking for, but hey, great shop. So they're probably fantastic. If you understand Korean and are looking for Korean manga, then they probably rate like a 5 for you.
Yeah.
But for me, it kind of came out to a 2.5 where I'm like, I really can't fault you for not having English books in a Korean neighborhood.
Well, yeah. I mean, they've followed the mantra of know your audience.
Exactly. Now, I will say that I have kind of avoided and danced around the one shop. This was a horrifying experience.
It's actually skewed your view of the entire company.
Which one? Are we talking about Alexandria?
Yeah,
What do you mean company?
like other stores with the same name.
I don't think there's going to be any other stores with the same name. This was a privately owned one.
Oh, that one. Okay.
That one, yeah.
Different shop. Never mind.
No, the one in Leesburg was the one that skewed.
Right.
Laughing Ogre Comics.
Right.
This was comics or comic and card collectorama.
Just starting off with the name, that's a pretty strong boast. And you better be able to back it up. I mean, if you're calling yourself a collectorama,
right?
That tells me you have tons of collectibles, and they are in collectible condition.
Right. I, followed my map, got to this place. Parking, not a problem, and finding the shop, not that hard. Getting in the shop should have been my first indicator. I walk up and I go to push the door, and it opens halfway. And this wasn't like opens halfway, give it a little extra push. This was it opens halfway.
Like an episode of Hoarders.
Actually, it was.
Yeah.
I go in and this guy's growing live plants in there. So it's a very humid shop, which we're talking humidity in a comic shop. Not a good thing.
No, water and paper tend not to mix.
No. I will say that the shop had a weird smell.
Describe that smell for us. I would love to hear what this humid hoarder type shop smelled like.
It was a bitter smell. It smelled very musky and bitter. So
like mildew and
rotting things.
Lovely.
Yeah. This shop was tiny. It was crammed. I mean, there was no clear aisle, no nothing. It was just boxes piled around. In fact, I don't even think he could get to his register due to the pile of trash that was at the end of the register or at the end of the counter.
Oh, that's lovely.
And this wasn't like, oh, I've just cleaned up, I need to take the trash out for today. That's been there for a while, hasn't it? What I genuinely think this was a guy that, that has a hoarding issue and opened a store, to try and, I guess, rationalize or normalize his hoarding habits.
Right.
And it was genuinely, it was very sad, and it was very terrifying.
Right.
The main reason it was sad was that this place had gold, silver, age comics. I mean, These are comics that were made before I was a twinkle in my daddy's eye.
Right.
And they are heavily water damaged. Like, I was afraid to touch anything in there, due to the possibility of mold. And it just, no, they scored a 0.56. They're the first store to legitimately get a score of HDTH, which is how does this happen? It was a rating I created that I never thought would actually get used. I did use it when it came to closed stores, but they're closed.
Yeah.
This was a score that is below 1. And that's just incredible. I actually left there, got in my car, and drove straight to my home store, Victory Comics, and, told them about it. And it was very reminiscent of telling a campfire horror story, as a kid. Everyone from the comic shop that was in there was just kind of gathering around going, tell us more, but we don't want to hear more. Oh, God. How could he do that to these comics?
Sort of that same syndrome of, you don't know, man. You weren't there.
Yeah.
You didn't see it.
It was genuinely terrifying.
That is terrifying. I mean, the fact that someone would claim to be a business.
Right.
And essentially just turn out to be a hoarder who had to justify his hoarding.
Exactly. And so, I went to Victory, and that concept of I need to see where comics, I need to be somewhere where comics are cared for and loved.
Right.
And they did their best to comfort me and console me, and it was appreciated. They are, after all, my home store, and I love them very much.
Sure. Sure.
But Alexandria wasn't all bad. In fact, the other store that's in Alexandria was incredible. And I know I told you about that one.
Yeah.
That was where are they? After Time Comics in Alexandria. Now, for the listeners who don't know the Alexandria, Virginia area, this is a very upper class area. Very prestigious and very much a bustling business area.
In terms of Northern Virginia, this is like the tourist center,
right,
of Northern Virginia, because you have Old Town Alexandria, which is
where this was.
Yeah. Centuries old city.
Right. This was the location for the store was actually about a mile and a half from the metro. I mean, on a nice day, even on a halfway decent day, that's not a bad walk at all. And it's right on the main drag, and it's a small shop. It really is. It's about the size of my bedroom, which is a small bedroom.
Right.
But I knew I was in a special place when I walked in, and it's just the guy behind the counter and this young kid who I can only describe as, Buckets. Willy Wonka.
Charlie.
Yeah, Charlie Buckets. Thank you. Look like Charlie from Willy Wonka in the Gene Wilder. Had glasses, and that was the only difference. But the hair was there, the lankiness, and I see him talking to the guy, and he goes, thank you for finding these comics for me. And the guy's like, no problem. And he goes, keep the change. And the guy at the counter goes, no, I can't take your money, and hands the kid the money back. The kid kind of struggles with the comics in his hands, and the shopkeeper goes, no, give me the comics. You put that money in your pocket, and you go straight home. And I was like, I have walked into the candy shop from
the original Willy Wonka.
From the original Willy Wonka, not the Johnny Depp creepiness. I mean, you don't see that anymore, ever. And it was just so cool. It was so cool. While it was a small shop, there were other shops they could have moved to. I talked to the guy about it. He said, they were afraid they'd lose their charm, and I think they're right.
There is something to be said for an older building with a mom and pop style comic shop.
Absolutely. And this place had gold, silver, bronze, modern age comics. These were comics that predate my dad.
Right.
That they had in this shop. They had some collectibles, but not much. But that wasn't their thing. They were comics. And while they were a small shop, by no means did I feel claustrophobic. Did I feel cramped or crowded? It was very well laid out. And they did a lot with the little bit of space they had. I was so impressed and just so thrilled. I actually was going to save this store for next week's episode.
Right.
But because of how cool of a shop it was, they made it on this week's.
Sure.
And so After Time Comics in Alexandria, Virginia, if you ever get the chance, they actually scored a 4.15 out of 5. So 4.15 bat signals out of 5, which is a phenomenal score. Much better than, the 2.7.
Yeah.
Or
you've just had a bad week.
Right.
Is what it boils down to.
I hit 8 shops, and I had three major successes. So there was After Time Comics, which a 4.15 is phenomenal for any shop, especially one being as tiny as it was.
Well, the only one better thus far is Jay and Silent Bob's, is it not?
No. There are a few. Victory.
Right.
Victory. There's Jay and Silent Bob's, and then there's actually two of the other shops I hit this week. Now to go back to Annandale.
Right.
There was Collector's World, and that's an interesting store. It is a genuine comic shop, but they are half comics, half sports collectibles, which
as we've seen in recent years, are losing their value tremendously.
absolutely. And anyone who knows me knows that I could care less about sports.
Right.
I'm the guy that when you walk up and go, "What do you think of this local team?" I go, "Yay sports." Straight Big Bang Theory. Yay sports. I don't care about sports.
Right.
It's just not something I follow or tend to care about. But I do appreciate there are fans, there are people who love it and grew up on it. So, half the shop is sports collectibles, jerseys, helmets, baseball cards, cards of all kinds.
Right. But that being said, having half your shop devoted to collectibles,
yeah.
the idea that a baseball card is worth 20% of what it was 5 years ago,
Yeah.
if not less.
And see, they actually didn't just have collectibles for sports, though.
Right.
They did also have a large number of action figures, very collectible ones. So they did really have a huge collectible selection. They actually are about to celebrate 21 years. And were recently purchased by a new owner who's planning to just keep the shop the same.
Good.
If anything, he's going to expand and possibly open up another location.
Okay.
But great owner. I actually met the new owner. And I actually met the old owner as well. The day I went in there was pretty much the handoff day for the business.
Well, lucky you.
So I got to meet both the old and the new owners, which was a cool experience. And comic-wise, I walk in. I've been looking for an Azrael #1. They had it. That's where I grabbed my Spawn #1.
Right. Which is very proudly displayed right behind you.
Yes. My Crisis on Infinite Earths #7, Death of Supergirl.
Yep.
I grabbed a Batman Death in the Family there.
Yep.
Also got a Superman #75, Death of Superman, when he fought Doomsday.
Right.
And it was kind of a morbid visit.
Hey, morbid sells.
It does. And that's the thing is, going back and reading the Death in the Family book, when you're sitting there and you're reading, you get to the point that Joker has Jason Todd held captive.
Right.
And he starts to beat him with a crowbar. This is where the comic shifts from being broken up into about 6 to 8 cells per page to roughly 20 cells per page. Very small cells, and all you see is Joker, combinations of Joker's face and the crowbar going up, coming down, and it doesn't go on for a page. It doesn't go on for 2. It's about 4 pages of Joker slowly, systematically beating Jason Todd to death and enjoying every minute of it.
So staying true to the Joker character, his psychology,
Yeah.
and just being as graphic as possible.
And see, the key there is that Joker doesn't just, kill him.
Right.
He beats him to the point of death, but leaves him alive. Places a bomb in the building and ties Jason's mother to a pole in the building with him. And knowing that, Jason is in no condition to try and disarm this bomb or save his mother, he, in his last living moments, is going to watch his mother be blown up with him. And this is a series of, 6 pages that just give you chills. It was so well written and so graphic, but so beautifully done. You gotta appreciate it. Same thing with, Superman #75.
Right.
Right when you get to the end, there is the page that every time I've ever seen it, it will give me a chill. and it's at the end of the battle. You've got Superman who's been fighting Doomsday, and it's this brutal, drawn-out fight.
Right.
And both Superman and Doomsday are laying dead in this giant crater. And the picture, it's a full-page cell, and it shows Clark's parents back home, the Kents, in Smallville, watching their son's death live on TV.
Right.
Holding each other. And I mean, for any parent to have to see their child die, let alone see their child die on the news.
Yeah.
It's a very, and it's only preceded by Lois Lane digging his body out of the crater and holding him in her arms. You can't get more emotionally wrenching than that. This is Superman.
Right.
As much as I can hate on him, or anybody can, it's Superman.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong.
And the Crisis on Infinite Earths run, well, they killed everyone.
Sure. Why not?
And that cover is Superman standing there holding the dead Supergirl in his arms. So, some fantastic finds. Definitely memorable to comic history. So,
well, that leads me into sort of my next odd thought process for this week. Supervillain face-offs.
Which, if you follow my Twitter feed, you'll know that I'm very active on this subject.
But there are some you don't necessarily want to see in film, and some that you really, really do.
Okay.
And it's sort of based on the adaptation of the individual characters, too.
All right.
Because you could argue, if you had the Cesar Romero Joker versus the Michael Clark Duncan Kingpin, there's no contest there.
No.
Because, Cesar Romero just played it silly.
Right. Or even animated series Joker, who was a bit psychotic, but not
as dark.
No.
As in recent years.
Or, or even in earlier comic
as
years.
He was originally intended, yeah.
Right. And that's very true. It's something that I've had to play with on a couple different times when talking to people. It's a matter of like, okay, I did a Green Arrow versus Hawkeye. Okay, well, which Green Arrow?
Yeah, very true.
It's versus which Hawkeye? Because God knows there were some Green Arrows and some Hawkeyes that both sucked.
Yeah. Well, that's true of any character, yeah.
And I mean, it's a matter of like, okay, if we go with the Hawkeye from the current Marvel run, who is fantastically badass and just brutal. Let's go with like the roughly 80s era Green Arrow.
Right.
Yeah, kind of hardcore coming out of the 70s, pretty brutal, pissed off all the time. Those two would make an interesting matchup. But if we go with like Green Arrow from the early 2000s,
yeah,
not so much. No. You kind of want him to get shot in the face, kind of with like Hawkeye from the 90s.
Yeah. Well, that's what I would say about it. If we were to square off two superheroes against each other, like if we would do the Tim Burton Batman versus the Adam West Batman.
Oh, that would be awesome. Or see Adam West get his ass beat.
Yeah. The Tim Burton Batman versus any of that original series.
Right. It would be no contest.
Right, because badassery in Tim Burton
versus campy.
Trumps campy every time.
Yeah. But you have these memorable moments in comic books, which actually does lead me to Woodbridge. This shop was awesome.
Unexpectedly so, I would say.
As you got a very, probably, I can only imagine what your expression was when I texted you from there. Would you like to describe that moment for you?
It made me want to leave where I was right that second and drive unsafely to Woodbridge.
So I go to this shop that is actually right around the corner from my work. And I stop in before work, and it's walking in, it's walls of comic books. Now, they had some back issues. A lot of what they had was more just memorable, important comics.
which is also really good.
Right. Now, there wasn't a lot in the way of back issues, but I will be fair with them and say that talking to them, they are going to be remodeling very soon. That is a high priority for them to bring in. So, that is something that's very important. Oh, actually, before I forget, the score for the location in Annandale.
Yes.
The location in Annandale actually did get a 4.42 bat signals out of 5.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's for being half filled with sporting goods. And you know how much I hate sporting goods.
Right. I mean, for you, that shop wasn't perfect, but
No.
for me,
right.
it might. If I can get, a run of Harley Quinns with an Ovechkin stick, I'll be a happy guy.
Right. They actually did have a Spawn, not a Spawn, what was it? Brain fart. Not Carnage.
TikTok.
Venom. They had a Venom #1 signed by Stan Lee in the front case.
How much?
200.
Okay, so not unreasonable.
Yeah. But back to Woodbridge. So I walk in. You got all these comics laying around. You got new comics just packed. You've got collectibles all along the walls. Action figures, statues, you name it. And just a ton of major important comics and story arcs. After talking to them for a bit and looking around, I finally end up texting Ox here with the question of, do I blow my comic budget for this store? Because part of it is when I walk into any comic store to do a review, I set a budget for myself. And that is a way to keep myself in check and to keep my beloved from killing me.
Yes. Got to keep her happy.
Right. And my normal budget maxes out at 50. And I walk in to see a Spider-Man number 252 for $60. And now, for those of you who aren't familiar, Amazing Spider-Man number 252, that is the first appearance of Black Suit Spider-Man. It's where he went from that really kind of just traditional costume that I didn't like too much of, the black and blue, or red and blue, to the black and white, just badassery.
Now, I'm looking at this comic right now. Does that say 60 cents on the cover?
It does. And not only is this finding this comic, the grade of this comic is upwards of probably about a 9.8.
Yeah, almost perfect.
Yeah, if not perfect, it is as close to mint or gem mint as you're going to get.
Yeah.
And so I grabbed this for $60. It prices out at 80 normally on some sites. Others you can find it pricing out more commonly around 400.
Right.
So this was a steal for me.
I should say so.
Yeah. And it's just also a beautiful and important comic. The only one that I would match with it is the Secret Wars Spider-Man, which actually tells the origin of Black Suit Spider-Man.
Right.
But this is a store that had a Spider-Man number 2. I mean, we're talking an Amazing Spider-Man number 2 in fairly reasonable condition. And for comparison, Spider-Man number 1 is graded by Atomic Avenue at $18,590,000, and the fact that I know that off the top of my head is probably a little creepy.
No, it shows your dedication to knowing this kind of thing.
Right. So a number 2, it's a substantial find. These guys are knowledgeable. Being able to sit there and talk to them and go, what's your opinion on the current age of comics. What do we call it? Is it the modern age? Is it the dark age? Is it New 52? And by dark age, I'm not referring to these comics suck. I'm referring to this is a dark time for comics. Our storylines are darker than they've ever been. And artists have more freedom, especially with the death of the comic book code.
Too true. And you could argue that this era that we're currently in, with the darker storylines, with the darker drawings, with the more graphic depictions within standard comic books.
Right.
You could argue that, the greats, Frank Miller, Todd McFarlane, Clive Barker, that these guys were bringing that to the forefront with their darker series of comics. Because I can tell you, just watching Sin City made me want to go back and read everything. Watching The Watchmen made me want to go back and read everything.
Constantine. Watching Constantine.
Watching Constantine made me want to go vomit. I thought that movie was horrible.
You also hate Keanu Reeves. That, again, a lot of people do. But it's still the storyline. It's ignoring the actors, ignoring all that. It's the storyline of it that I can appreciate.
Right, and I can too.
By no means am I saying that Constantine was at the same movie caliber as Watchmen or V for Vendetta or Sin City.
Right.
But it was important because it also was one of the first, I think, indie comics made into a movie.
Yeah.
Or at least a major motion picture. Numerous ones had been made into movies, but never before at a box office release like Constantine.
Because I remember watching Spawn.
Yeah.
Like, I saw it in the theater.
Yeah.
And...
well, there's also Blade, but Blade was a Marvel comic.
Yeah. Blade, I thought was a good movie.
Yeah.
I thought Spawn sucked as a movie. I'll still watch it.
Yeah.
But John Leguizamo and Martin Sheen, great actors, great character actors.
Yep.
But the script wasn't there.
No, it wasn't. And that's part of what we deal with as comic fans watching these movies. I know a lot of people who didn't know that Constantine or V for Vendetta or, Sin City really originated from comics.
Right.
Your average individual is like, these were comics? Yes. These are dark? Yes. These are actually happier than the comics.
Right, because they still got to sell tickets.
Yeah. But, with the death of the comic book code in, December of 2010, which if you visited our merch site, you'll see a lot of gear celebrating that day.
Yes, cafepress.com/zombiesasylum.
Yeah. I will say, shameless self-promotion. But still, it really did spark off a huge era of just writers going, you know what? I don't give a fuck what you think. I'm putting this out. And it's also, I think with the death of the comic book code, it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning. The indie comics.
Yeah.
If
you're not responsible to sort of a corporate code or a corporate standard, you have a lot more freedom to write what you want rather than write what the company wants to see.
Exactly. And I mean, that's why we ended up with Image Comics and Spawn. Was that writers got pissed off with Marvel, they got pissed off with DC, they went and formed Image.
Yeah.
But we have these smaller indie companies coming up like Zoe Lost in Time. Or Zoe Out of Time. And other different writers from across the pond over in UK.
Oh yeah.
And they're coming out with these storylines and these artists that DC and Marvel would be lucky to get some of these illustrators and some of these inkers in.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I didn't know any better looking at the art style from Zoe Out of Time, I would think it was on the caliber of Zenescope or IDW or Image, or even a Marvel or DC subsidiary.
Yeah.
And that's speaking bounds to you guys. Incredible art, and that's not just you guys, that's the indie industry. We're seeing people that you go, you know what, I would love to work for Marvel, but I can't get an interview because they're too locked down. They're too big. There are artists and there are writers, and they aren't able to get their stuff out there because they just can't get their foot in the door. So they go and they create their own comics. And now that we have the comic book code out of the way, they're held accountable to no one, and it's fantastic.
Yeah. No, I sort of compare it to the indie music scene, not necessarily the indie genre, not the White Stripes and whatever else. But you've got artists and bands who write whatever they want, record it themselves, release it on their own label,
Right.
and only have distro contracts.
Yep.
Which to me is fantastic. It's unfortunate that those things don't always get to us,
Right.
but at the same time, the caliber is there.
Right. Or that we can have an indie publisher, publish on the Kindle. And while I am not necessarily myself a big fan of the concept of digital comics, there are those out there that are. For me, I'm an old school collector. I want to hold it in my hands. But that is me.
But do you think as we progress, as everything is available on our phones,
Right.
are hard copy comics going to go the way of the dodo?
I don't think so. Because there are always going to be the collectors, and there is, a lot of people have said that about gaming.
True.
And the difference is gamers are the kind of people that they want to hold a physical game in their hands if they're going to spend the money on it. Comic collectors, we've been doing this a lot longer than gamers.
True. True.
The in comparison, the gaming industry to the comic industry is in infancy.
Right.
It started in the 80s. Comics and comic books as we know them, World War II.
Yeah.
That's, 60, 70 years ago?
Yeah. Close to, yeah.
So, yeah, we got a big jump on it. And we have, that much time frame, 70 years drilled into us of hold a book in your hands.
Yeah. Well, I sort of compare it to music in this way. It's like, yes, I have thousands upon thousands of songs in my hard drive,
Yeah.
but nothing replaces a show.
Yeah.
Even if you buy a DVD of the concert later, it's still not the same thing.
Yeah. I went to a show, saw a great band, and right there, I could have gone on to iTunes. They had iTunes options available. No, I bought the album. Why?
I've actually done that. I've been at a show and purchased an album on iTunes.
Yeah.
And that's only because A, I didn't have cash on me, and B, I didn't have the pocket space.
Right, but there is that option of, you know what?
Yeah.
I just want to buy the album. Why? Because this is a good album, and I feel like I should hold it in my hands.
Which is why I've seen the return to vinyl for a lot of people.
Yeah, very true. So no, I don't think that. I think there will be a niche for e-comics.
Yeah.
And that it may run strong, but there's always going to be that demand for comics. I don't see that going away.
Okay.
So, Woodbridge was a fantastic shop. I will go there again, with a larger budget next time. One that I've carefully talked out with the beloved, because, yeah, I would love to buy that Spider-Man number 2. That'd be fantastic. And
bear in mind, anyone who wishes to purchase this for him can do so as a wedding present, I'm sure.
Yeah, not gonna argue with that at all. Now that was the store in Woodbridge.
Yes.
They are Painted Visions Comics and Cards.
Okay.
It's a very long name, but that's what they are. Painted Visions Comics and Cards. They also have a huge Magic case.
Right.
If I knew anything about Magic cards, I would probably be impressed.
Oh, also, if you actually still play with Magic cards, tweet us, shoot us an email, zombieanox@gmail.com. Let us know what you go into these shops looking for.
Yeah.
I mean, tell us your experiences. Let us know if you're trying to sell collectibles and comics and what prices you're getting. Let us know your experiences with some of these other shops. We are only two guys. We can only be at one place at once.
Right, and the experience I may have, may not be the experience you have. So, if you've been to anywhere and we've been there and you've had a horrible experience, tweet us, please. Direct message. Something. Just let us know the experiences you've had, whether it agrees, doesn't agree. In a lot of ways, we're scientists. I don't care if the shop I go into is fantastic or horrifying. I would much rather it be fantastic. But at the end of the day, the data is data. And Woodbridge for me came out to a 4.72. Which, yeah, that's
stellar.
Yeah. 4.72 bat signals out of 5. You really can't do much better. I mean, God, parking was a dream. The only thing that sucked was trying to make the left at that light, and it took forever, and I really can't fault them for that one.
No, unfortunately, they're not in charge of the stoplights.
Yeah, but it was still a great trip.
Yeah.
So let's see, I've gotten them, Comic Land. That was actually all the stores for this week.
Good. Cool.
Yeah. We do have a lot more coming up, and I've got a bunch of comics that I've got to try and track down, like Batman Red Sun.
Yes. Yeah.
Which was a storyline that I don't know how I missed, but I need to own this comic. It's
sort of like Chris Nolan said. Everybody wants to do a Batman story.
Right.
So there's probably 150 different lines of Batman comics out there somewhere.
Right. Same with Superman.
Yeah.
And, for those who aren't familiar, Superman Red Sun, it bases off a sole linchpin theory that Krypton blew up a few hours later than it actually did. So, therefore, the rocket launch went a few hours later than originally. The result of this, simple change in timeline meant that the rocket came down in the farmland of Ukraine. Not Kansas, Ukraine. During the Soviet Union, during the height of the Cold War. What happens when Superman, the crusader for truth, justice, and the American way, becomes a commie?
I have a feeling we should actually make an alternate cover. Because you saw the ultra-patriotic World War II USA Superman Go thing.
The covers on these...
Yeah,
are very, very red heavy. Communist. Your sickle and hammer. It's truly Superman fighting for Stalin. And what's really interesting is that Lex of all people, bad guy Lex, evil genius, ruler of LexCorp. Former president, guy who in an alternate universe shot Flash in the face with a shotgun.
Shades of Dick Cheney.
Yeah, a little bit. Became the hero of America.
Right.
Because he was a genius. So you have this red threat, Superman. I mean, it doesn't get much more threatening than communist Russia using Superman as a weapon. That's a nuclear deterrent if I ever saw one. And so what do? The U.S. turns to Lex. Lex, who's not being conceived as the bad guy because he doesn't like Superman,
right,
now is praised for hating Superman because he's the red threat.
Right.
So you have Lex, who pretty much does what Lex does, but because everything else changed, he's a hero. And it's just fascinating that a simple time change of a couple hours changes the universe that drastically.
What was that? It was either a comic or a movie I saw. Or maybe it was just an episode of Futurama. It's like, what had happened? What would have happened if in one of his early speeches somebody assassinated Hitler?
Oh, yeah, that was... That was
time travel Futurama episode.
Yeah, that was the one where he shot the laser beam into the ceiling and it dripped down the message because he missed the date.
Right.
Yeah. Then at the end of time starts over again.
Apparently it's cyclical.
Yeah. But fantastic storylines. So these are things that I'm going to be hunting for in the coming week as we visit more shops, because now we're having to head north of the Mason-Dixon line.
Yeah, this is true.
which works for you and your northern roots and well, my southernness of technically the South. Even though I'm from Northern Virginia and we're really much more part of the North than
It is the state of Northern Virginia at this
yeah.
point.
It's a matter of we're going to Maryland, the state I love oh so much. And that's why you're driving.
Great.
Yeah. But we've got to go hit that. We've got the 2 in DC.
Yes.
So, we got some great shops that we got to hit coming up, and those are going to be fantastic. One thing I want to mention, and I brought this up with you the other day.
Yeah.
Joker.
Yes.
Joker. And I think we're not going to agree on this one.
We might.
I
don't know.
Insane or not?
See, with that question, you have to, unfortunately, go back to another Keanu Reeves movie.
Okay.
In Speed, when they're talking about Dennis Hopper.
Right.
He's crazy, not stupid.
Right. Well, see, at the same time, it goes back to that old Captain America comic I was talking about.
Yeah.
Where Joker tees off with the Red Skull, and the Red Skull goes, you would make a fantastic Nazi. And Joker doesn't, accept this. He gets pissed. And he turns to Red Skull and goes, I may be a homicidal maniac, but I'm an American homicidal maniac.
Well, then you've answered your own question.
He's a homicidal maniac. Being homicidal...
Which is inherently insane.
No.
By conventional standards.
No. Conventional standards are skewed, and I'm sorry, but the human race does one thing and only one thing with perfection, and that is kill each other.
Very true.
The people who have been regarded as the most sane people in the world have not hesitated to drop a bomb on another country, killing thousands.
True.
So just because one kills or is willing to take a life does not make them insane.
The difference, though, is in the justification.
But I don't think we can truly understand Joker's justification because I believe in the hypersanity theory with Joker. That he is so far above any known intelligence level that he sees the world and the universe in a way that we can't imagine. And so to him, his justification may make perfect sense in the way that he sees things due to his intelligence level. I mean, we're talking about a level of intelligence that he sees the butterfly effect in action. So, yeah. I'm going with the theory that Joker isn't insane. He's fucking brilliant.
But if he's not insane, that sort of eliminates 2 or 3 storylines, as well as one of my favorite characters in the history of comic regalia.
How?
Well, if he's not insane,
Right.
doesn't get institutionalized.
No, not at all. He's still institutionalized because we don't understand his level of thought process. We think he's insane. But the question isn't, is he insane to a point that this reverses comic knowledge? This is just, what do we think based off what we know? This isn't to change anything.
Okay. Well, based on what we know...
Right.
In my opinion, a humble one at that, dude's fucking nuts.
I think he's brilliant. But then again, I'm also a bit off, so...
I'm not making any claim that I'm not.
Yeah, but
dude's fucking nuts.
See, I think he's brilliant.
Sure, he's hyper intelligent.
Yeah.
But there is that... something just ain't right. Like, I know you've seen this before. You ever look into a person's eyes and you can tell just by looking at them, it's like something just isn't right. There's a synapse that's not connecting. Something about your brain is wired differently from everyone else I've ever seen.
Yeah, I see that when I look in the mirror.
Okay. Fair point. Any depiction of the Joker that I've ever seen Dude looks nuts, especially in this Arkham Asylum book that you're holding up right now.
By Grant Morrison.
Yeah.
The reason I grabbed this book, and yes, for the viewer or for the listeners, I did reach behind me, directly behind me, and just grab the Arkham Asylum Grant Morrison graphic novel off my bookshelf. In this novel, it actually is one of the ones that covers the hypersanity theory. It's also the graphic novel where they break Two-Face by giving him more options. Instead of using the coin, they actually got him up to a set of die, then changed the die to, was it from a 6-sided die to I think a deca die, then to like, we're talking like
Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah,
shit.
Dungeons and Dragons dice, and then they moved him up to a deck of tarot cards. The problem with that was that they gave him so many options that simple things like, do I go to the bathroom, became overtly complicated. So, fascinating read. And very, very twisted in its art style, but still fantastic. Is where I first really read about the hypersanity theory. And I love it. I love the concept.
The concept in and of itself is not flawed.
Right.
I just don't think it applies here.
I think it applies here more than anywhere else.
I don't know. I mean, if you
Maybe
take...
that's just hopefulness for myself.
Probably.
Then again, at the same time, I've said it numerous times before, as much as I love Mark Hamill and love what he's done for Joker.
Yeah.
If they ever find a stash pile of bodies with smiley faces carved into them in his basement, I am going to be the last person that is surprised. You play the Joker for that many decades,
Yeah.
it's going to have an effect.
Okay, here's another example of how absolutely batshit this guy is. In the 1989 film,
Right.
the character uses a gas called Smilex, which not only...
Where can I get that, by the way?
You can't. It doesn't exist. Stop looking. Anyway.
Just kick my puppy.
Kills people while putting this sick, perverted, twisted grin permanently etched on their face. No, it's worse than that. It's worse than what you're doing.
See, at the same time, though, at Joker's level of thought and Joker's level of processing, that may be the logical thing. I see that.
So this the whole
it makes
idea-
sense to me.
The whole idea that this guy's just a sadistic, crazy dude who's not going to stop for anything doesn't add up.
No. See, I see the Smilex gas concept as it makes perfect sense to me. Joker perceives death as a painful, uncomfortable experience. Why not go out with a smile on your face?
And you don't see that there's something inherently wrong with that.
No, I see it as him being actually compassionate and comforting as they die.
Okay, maybe I should reconsider the source as I'm posing these questions.
So true, so true. I mean, this is the one character that I have been terrified to cosplay as.
And with good reason.
Yeah.
Dude is absolutely insane.
But at the same time, I mean, you got to look at how deep into the characters I go when I cosplay. I mean,
I know. You go all the way into the history.
yeah. I mean, my Scarecrow.
Yeah, you find out exactly why they are the way they are.
And I think the biggest part of what's posing this question is that for the first time ever, I have been playing with the idea of actually doing a Joker cosplay.
Well, let's switch over to the Scarecrow then.
Right.
Which way do you go?
Mine goes just absolutely dark and primal. Mine goes to a bestiary level of it. Just the true, just primal nature of fear.
Okay, but do you go sane and super intelligent, or do you go batshit?
I go more...
Not your portrayal.
Right.
the characters that we've seen.
Right. I mean, if we look at, I see it as sane. I really do. Because it's a concept that Jonathan Crane and I share in common. You know, he does what he does to try and understand something that he finds fascinating. His level of obsession is not natural with fear by normative social standards. But do I find it... Is his obsession wrong? No. Everyone can be obsessed with something. The level he takes it to can be wrong.
Right.
And that's the line. So Jonathan Crane has had so many iterations over the years.
Right.
We can look at the original Scarecrow from the Batman comics in, what was that, Detective Comics number 36, I believe was the first appearance. It was in the 30s, number 30s. You know, it was a kind of fearful, kind of campy looking Scarecrow, like you find on a farm.
Right.
Scarecrow. Animated series actually took him a bit darker than Joker, which was kind of a twist. But, you know, we had that level of that Scarecrow with the elongated face and a bit more on the rational, just kill you style, kind of like a Freddy Krueger.
Right. I mean, I would argue that Freddy Krueger is more comical than anything else.
Right. Absolutely. But at the same time, that kind of level of just, I'm going to kill you now. And then in Arkham Asylum, we saw kind of them touching on that bestiary level. You know, the lack of shirt, just a mask. You know, it was a much more primal Scarecrow than we had seen before. And I think that's where a lot of my inspiration for my Scarecrow comes from. You know, my cosplay character ends up in a pose very low to the ground, walking on nearly all fours, if not threes.
Right.
Constantly in a crouched position and talking very little. But when I do, it is enough that it does give people chills.
Sure.
You know, it's also a level of, yes, the mask that I wear was hand sewn by me out of burlap to match my face.
Right.
As well as the goggles and the respirator mask.
Right.
So it's... I see Jonathan Crane as, yeah, he is brilliant. But his obsession is what makes him, you know, perceived as insane. And I do think that insane is a fluctuating value.
Unfortunately, there is no real standard for
insanity. It changes with the social norm.
True. I would argue anyone that decides to use fear as a weapon is insanely smart.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Is super smart. But at the same time, there's got to be some sort of a cognitive disconnect there.
Yeah.
Because when Bruce Wayne uses fear as a weapon, which he does on the regular.
Well, let's face it, he's got his own set of issues.
He is emotionally and mentally scarred.
Yeah.
Which I would argue is the same with Crane.
Yeah.
That he is emotionally and mentally scarred. Same with the Joker.
Oh, yeah.
Same with Two-Face.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing with Joker, though, is that out of every villain in every comic series, we know where they come from. We know who they were. We know what makes them the way they do. And what makes them the way they are. And we can analyze it. I can step back and look at it from an abnormal psychology perspective. I can look at it from a psychological standpoint. I can pull out my DSM.
Yeah.
You know, Diagnostic Statistical Manual. And I can actually use actual psychiatric standards and, you know, diagnose these individuals.
Yeah.
Because I know the timeline of events. I know where they started, how they became what they became, and where they are now.
Whereas,
Joker.
Yeah. With Joker, the only thing we can absolutely be for certain.
He's human.
He's human. He's narcissistic. And has no problem killing people.
Right.
And that's pretty much it.
Yeah. You know, and we actually saw a lot of... That was one of my issues with the 1989 Joker. was that they're naming him. They're saying, oh, it's Jack Rapier. Oh, we know who he is. We know why he is the way he is.
That and the fact that they make Jack Napier the Wayne's murderer.
Right.
In one universe of Batman, that's true.
Yeah.
Not the way I would have gone, but it worked.
It did. And, but at the same time, the true Joker,
Yeah.
we don't know where he came from, why he is the way he is. We saw it in Nolan. They talk about when he's sitting in jail, that there's no tags even in his clothing.
No fingerprints.
Yeah.
No aliases. Nothing.
Nothing. I mean, granted, he does develop aliases later, but he's the Joker.
Yeah.
Every inmate at Arkham is, Jonathan Crane, a.k.a. Scarecrow.
Right.
Joker is the only one that is Joker.
Right.
There's no alias. It's the clown guy.
His aliases are based strictly on the Joker identity.
Right. His aliases tend to be more normative. And they're what he'll set up businesses under.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a flip side. But then again, we also see that with I loved it in a recent Batman Beyond episode I saw, where who was it? Shriek. Shriek was tormenting Bruce Wayne.
Right.
And it attacked him. Bruce Wayne ends up in the hospital. Shriek pays a nurse to put a Band-Aid on Bruce's head.
Right.
Inside the Band-Aid was a transmitter that was sending voices fundamentally into Bruce's head.
Right.
These voices are telling him, don't eat, the food's poisonous, jump out the window, kill yourself, basically what you would expect to hear from a schizophrenic. The biggest thing is you've got Terry McGinnis, a.k.a. New Batman, Batman Beyond, standing there going, how do you know you're not crazy? And he goes, the voices call me Bruce. That's not what I call myself. Bruce doesn't refer to himself. Bruce Wayne is the alias.
Right.
We only have two heroes, really, in all of comics. And both of them are in the DC universe.
Yep.
And that is Batman and Superman, who are Batman and Superman first, alias Clark Kent, Bruce Wayne.
Right. The quote unquote real identity.
Yeah.
Is actually the cover.
Yep. And those are the only two. Everyone else is who they are. Well, Wonder Woman doesn't really have an alias. I mean, she's Wonder Woman. Everybody knows who she is.
She's just a fucking alien.
She's an Amazonian. Not an alien. Hawk Girl's an alien. I mean, she's got wings growing out her back.
I don't know.
I
don't know.
Another thing that I will say has massively increased with the death of the comic book code, and I couldn't be happier. And I mean, one thing that, Ox, you know about me, and a large number of people know about me, is I am a massive crusader for LGBT rights. And we have seen more pushes for LGBT acceptance in comics than we even see in everyday life.
Well, partially because it's safe.
Right.
It's a fictionalized world where there's, I guess the best way I can put it is there's a greater education into the alternative lifestyles.
And the other aspect is that there is one thing that comic writers and illustrators and inkers and anyone in the comic industry wants. And there is a common goal across DC, IDW, Marvel, Image, everywhere. Every person in the comic industry wants any kid in the world to be able to walk into any comic store and find a comic that they can relate to. It's part of why Oracle was put in a wheelchair. Because for handicapped or disabled children, there was no one for them to admire and look up to in that sense.
Right.
And while she was disabled, it wasn't a handicap for her. She crusaded through technology and assisted and was able to help. You know, there was actually a mother, and I don't know if you ever heard about this. She had a 10-year-old son, I think it was, who was born deaf, had been deaf his whole life, and loved comic books. And one day he broke down and just had a fit because there was no character that he could relate to.
Sure.
Mom got pissed, like many parents would, and she just shot off this pissed off email to, I believe it was DC Comics. And it was just sent to like a random mailbox, just something that, you know, she had spent all day with this distraught child. She just needed to get it out. Never thought she'd hear anything. What turns up but a few weeks, I think it was a few weeks or a few months later, but a box from the writers and, you know, illustrators. They saw the email and they went, you know what? We've never had a deaf hero. Let's have a deaf hero. So they actually published a short run of comics and sent her son the first issues.
Nice.
You know, and that's something that you see in the comic industry. You don't really see that anywhere else. And so I think by trying to reach out to the LGBT community, there are the kids that, you know, DC, Marvel is trying to go, hey, we know you're there. We want you to relate and feel okay.
Well, that sort of goes with the whole idea of specific people identifying themselves as somewhat marginalized in some way.
Right. And, you know, Earth 2 in the New 52 relaunch, it wasn't a thing for Green Lantern, Alan Scott, to come out.
Right.
It was issue 1, you see him in Earth 2 doing the dip French kiss with his boyfriend. You know, this wasn't a coming out issue. This was a, oh, he's gay.
Right.
Okay. Batwoman number 17 from the DC relaunch.
Right.
First lesbian marriage proposal in comics ever.
Well, I guess the general idea you could put behind this highly progressive movement within comics,
right,
is that the vast majority of comic authors and illustrators and heads of industry
show acceptance,
are progressive in one way or another.
Right. And we also saw it in Marvel. 2 of the X-Men characters married and were of the same gender.
Right.
You know, that was a big move. And that was something that was a big, long time coming for Stan Lee.
Sure.
For many X-Men fans out there, you're not going to like what I have to say. But it is actually the truth straight from Stan Lee. Cyclops was originally intended to be a gay character. But unfortunately, in the time frame that it was written, Stan Lee could get away with a lot. That wasn't one of them.
Right.
He was trying to line it up for that, realized it wasn't going to fly, and just backed off. And, you know, sent the character in another direction. So for him in his own comics, and let alone in the X-Men storyline, to have that sense of closure and completion, I can only imagine what it was like for him.
And not to be cynical, but you can sort of see that in the film adaptations and in the animated series.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like he's trying too hard to be this butch macho guy, and
oh yeah,
and I'm really into Jean Grey. I mean,
I really want to be with her. You know what I mean? Wait, what?
Yeah, that's sort of...
Yeah, we knew. Why did you put it that way?
That sort of overcompensation thing.
Yeah.
That, you know, when I was a kid watching that series, I didn't get it. I just thought, oh, he wants to be the hero. Looking back on it now, it's like, okay, he's obviously compensating. Jean Grey is a beard. You know, they're
yeah. I'm right there with you.
That comes with, you know, dealing with social progressives.
It does. And that's something that I do have to give Stan Lee a lot of credit for that.
Absolutely. He was before his time.
Yeah. And it'll, in so many different things. I mean, you know, we look at, you know, if we go back to the death of the Bronze Age, birth of the Silver Age, with Spider-Man 121 to Spider-Man 129. You know, 121, for those of you who aren't familiar, was the death of Gwen Stacy. Never before in comics had a character failed so catastrophically as Spider-Man did that day. And it wasn't just, oh, she died. It was, he didn't make it in time. And so, in a lot of ways, the hero always made it. The hero always saved the day. Not the hero showed up and she's dead.
But I think that added realism, that humanity to it.
It did. It really did. And, 129 was the first appearance of Punisher.
Right.
So these were a series of comics that really sealed the deal for the death of the Bronze Age, or the
Right.
Silver Age, and the birth of the Bronze Age, where we started getting into that progressive movement.
And with Punisher, not a superhero,
No. No. Anti-hero through and through.
normal guy.
Yeah. Just pushed to a breaking point. And, he broke.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
He broke hard. And what happened? He sought vengeance. As most people can understand. It was one that he was an anti-hero that was relatable in a lot of ways. There were a lot of people that would say, in the same situation, I don't know if I could do anything different.
Right.
And I mean, you can have that from your normal stockbroker guy in a suit and tie who will tell you that about Punisher.
Well, and that's the other thing too when it comes to the morality of these characters. Like Bruce,
Yeah.
fundamentally, like for the most part, with a few exceptions, like the Frank Miller Batman, obviously,
Yeah.
with guns and all that kind of stuff. Bruce won't kill anybody.
Right.
As the Bat, he won't kill anybody.
And we saw that in fantastic movie, Batman and the Red Hood. One of the best Batman movies I've ever seen.
Damn good.
Especially for an animated series.
Yay, John DiMaggio.
Yeah. You have, where Red Hood's pissed off and he's going, why couldn't you kill the Joker? Was it so damn difficult? And Batman's standing there going, no, not at all. No, it was too easy. I didn't because it wasn't, I didn't kill him because it was the hard thing to do or the easy thing to do. I didn't kill him because it would have been way too easy to throw him off a building, to beat him to death. And that he had to show that self-restraint.
Which I find confusing.
Yeah.
Like, I understand Bruce's morality. It's like he's not going to kill people because he saw his parents murdered in front of his eyes.
Right.
At the same time, well, I mean, I guess that's sort of what makes him so heroic, because I could not say that I would do the same.
It's also the one thing that stops him from sitting in Arkham with the rest of them.
Right. Too true.
It's a level of...
It's sort of a self-preservationist
Yeah.
mentality in addition to his self-inflicted moral code.
Yeah, it's also a level of, I think Batman has a sense of self-awareness behind his own insanity. He can stand back and, Alfred can look at him and go, sir, jumping from rooftop to rooftop in the middle of the night in a bat costume isn't normal. And he goes, oh, I know.
Well, if you really want to ask if Bruce Wayne is insane, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
Right. But the problem is he is getting results in a lot of ways.
In many ways, yes, but in the most base way, he's not.
Right. Because they escape, they get out, they do what they do again.
Yeah.
But I think it's a line he just refuses to cross. And for whatever reason, whatever moral code it is, you kind of can't argue with it too much. It's a level of, okay, he doesn't kill people.
Right.
All right.
Until you get to the Frank Miller series.
Right. But Frank Miller's a whole nother basket of bananas.
But Frank Miller, to me, is one of the current comic geniuses.
Oh, he is. He is. Absolutely.
I mean, not everything can be as cookie cutter as, any of the old Superman animated series,
Right.
live action series. It's like, oh, we're going to wrap this in a nice little bow in 22 minutes.
And see, what I loved about, the alternate storylines in the DC universe lines, or TV series, was where you have, Earth 2. You have Lex Luthor as president, killing the Flash. What does Superman do? Puts a laser beam and a heat vision beam through his brain.
Right.
You broke that boundary for Superman.
Yeah.
And we saw the world unwind. We saw everything come undone because Superman was now okay with killing. And see,
which is it's a very interesting sort of paradox you've got there.
Oh yeah.
Because if you have the hero, the crusader of truth, justice, and the American way, being willing to kill,
Yep.
to me it becomes a much more intense character.
It does.
Because at that point, any and all sort of preconceived notions of morality and the goody two-shoesness, and it's like, oh, I picked this petunia just for you, Lois, that kind of crap. that to me is fundamentally flawed because you're removing the humanity in the characters themselves. I can understand the restraint.
Yeah.
Because, we've seen it in the various incarnations of Bruce Wayne. He has been tempted to kill.
Oh, yeah.
And he wants to badly.
Very badly.
But due to the murder of his parents, he can't.
No. He won't.
Right. But he can't allow
he has
himself to
come
do it.
close.
Yeah, very true.
I mean, there have been a few times. And I mean, what is it? I was telling you about it last night.
Yeah.
The storyline where it was roughly early 2000s, I believe, and Joker gets the powers of Mixlix Pixlix.
Right.
Which, it was Mixlix Pixlix, for those who don't know, basically a leprechaun with the powers of a god and omnipotent. So, and evil. Really just an asshole. So you have Joker in this role who now can control space and time. Sits there and kills Batman over and over and over. Not for minutes, not for hours, for days. And every time Batman is brought back to life by Joker, he remembers what happened. And these weren't quick deaths. These were like, I'm going to slowly torture you to death, Mr. Bond.
Joker-style deaths.
Oh, yeah. And so then when Joker gets bored with killing Batman, he goes and poisons Lois Lane.
Right.
And as she's laying on the ground dying, Superman, Mr. Goody Two-Shoes, has him up in the air. And there goes your phone. Has him up in the air by the throat, ready to crush his throat. And he starts to crush his throat. And Superman realizes it's a line he shouldn't cross. And so just proceeds to, beat the crap out of him and put him down. What happens? Lois gets up after she's died. It wasn't a death. It was an illusion of death. The poison just made her look dead. So Joker's
It's
mind...
essentially a modern incarnation of Romeo and Juliet.
Right. Joker's mind saw it as, if I can make him kill me and she's still alive, I win. Which, oddly enough, makes sense. So it's that fascinating line of, can I make them cross it? Can I make them break that line? And that's what Joker strives to do with everyone he meets, is
right.
Where is your boundary? What line won't you cross, and how do I get you across it?
Right. But then there is also this self-destructive, suicidal nature of Joker anyway.
Right. Yeah, but I think that's just a lack of the ends meet the... Yeah.
The ends justify the means.
Exactly. Thank you. So, we have all these fascinating characters.
Yeah.
And plus there's the constant turmoil that Bruce Wayne's in, that the love of his life, Talia al Ghul, is not afraid to take a life by any means. I mean, she is the daughter of the demon, the heir to the League of Assassins.
Right.
And not only just the love of his life, but his wife at one point, mother of his child. And so he's basically eternally committed to this woman who, for all intents and purposes, has no issue whatsoever killing you. So, yeah. And we don't necessarily see those clearly defined moral lines as much in Marvel.
Right.
But I take that as it with DC, we step into the dark.
Well, also, to be fair, moral ambiguity is more interesting.
It is. But I mean, Marvel characters do have their turmoil. They do have their greatness behind them.
Sure.
But we don't see those clearly, this is the line I won't cross. It's I'm going to try not to do that. But it's something where you're like, oh, that's not bad. If he does that, it'll be bad, but they'll forgive him.
It's the finger quotes around try.
Right. And in DC, we see like the unforgivable acts.
Yeah.
It's those drastic natures of why go one or the other, DC or Marvel.
Yeah.
And it's one's own prerogative and one's own storyline.
Sure. Absolutely.
When we were talking about the different eras of comics,
Yeah.
one thing I am fascinated by is right now DC Comics is sitting in a position of lowest readership in quite some time, in years.
Yeah.
Marvel's seeing a great increase. Indie comics are seeing a great increase. The DC relaunch isn't doing as well as they like. As much as I would love to say otherwise, the comic shops are seeing it too.
Yeah.
But
I mean, we're seeing it in the products that are being put out by these various companies.
Yeah. And
we've got DC Universe, the online MMO.
Yeah.
You've got Arkham City.
Arkham Origins.
Arkham Origins coming out.
Immortals, Gods Among Us.
Yeah. DC is trying to market it towards that current generation of video gamers.
Yeah.
In addition to comic book readers.
Right. And in a lot of ways, I was talking to Victory about this the other day.
Yeah.
That while DC isn't quite keeping them in the door, it's getting them in the door.
Right.
And they're seeing an increase of readership overall. So these guys are coming in, guys, girls, whatever, they're coming in to pick up comics. They're finding that these aren't the same DC characters that they loved in the 90s.
Right.
But once they're in, you can convert them to something else. And that's great. As long as the industry's still growing. All right, DC may hit a lull, but they're going to come back with a vengeance, just like Marvel did in the 90s.
Yeah.
It was the flip in the 90s. DC had great, epic storylines in the 90s at the beginning of the modern age. So Marvel didn't quite adapt as well in the 90s, and they struggled. And now they're dominating. So I think possibly at the end of the modern age, which I'm wondering when it's going to be, we're going to see something new and something very different and very fascinating.
Well, that also begs the other question that we would like anyone to answer.
Yes.
Especially comic book writers, ink men, whatever.
Right.
What do you call this current age that we're in, and what do you call the next age?
I mean, is it postmodern? I mean, is it future age? Is it, copper age?
Along those lines, with the massive influx of steampunk influence in everything we see.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen it even in comics with the DeviantArt artist I showed you the other day.
Yeah.
If you go Google Gotham Gears,
yeah,
these are some fantastic, futuristic steampunk style, Marvel DC characters.
But you even see it on cable shows.
Yeah.
Warehouse 13.
Yeah.
Damn near everything they use is steampunk based.
Yep. And so where is it going to go? What do you think? And I will say that if you're a writer, if you're an inker, if you are anyone of a prestigious level in, DC, IDW, Image, Marvel, whatever, and you want to answer this question, please direct message us and
shoot us an email.
Shoot us an email. We will respect a request for off-the-record statements by all means. We just want to know the answer. Whether we can say what you said or we can just say a source gave us this opinion, it is just that. It's an opinion. And we're not going to hold it against you. We just want to know what you think. So please, message us by any means necessary. Facebook, Twitter, Gmail. We've got them all.
If you can find this show, you can find a way to contact us. So please do. Anybody. If you're listening, if you have a comment, question, anything about this show, do not hesitate to contact us. We will address any and all concerns to the best of our ability. So please hit us up, zombieandox@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter, on Facebook.
Yeah. Really.
Check out the Cafe Press store, cafepress.com/zombiesasylum.
On Twitter at Zombie and Ox, also at Comic Zombie 679, and yeah, those are our main ones. And by all means, hit us up, please. We love to know what you think. And hey, if you go look the Cafe Press site and you go, I want this kind of product, all right, I can do that. Just let me know. Shoot us a message. So I would say, you got anything else for this week's episode, Ox?
Nothing I want to bring up this week. Definitely next week is going to be a much more... it's going to be entertaining. I'll say that much. We've got some cool shit in store for you.
Are there tentacles?
No.
No? Oh. Wait, I mean, oh, okay, good.
All right, folks. We'll talk to you next week.
Next week.